What are you teaching my son? Marcus Wellington's voice echoed through the hallway as he stood frozen in the doorway of his study. His expensive Italian shoes clicked against the marble floor as he stepped closer, eyes fixed on the complex mathematical equations covering his whiteboard. Mr. Wellington, I can explain, Elena stammered, chalk still in her trembling hand, her cleaning uniform dusted with white powder. His 13-year-old son, David, sat at the desk, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Dad, please listen. I hired you to clean my house, not to fill my son's head with, whatever this is. Marcus's face flushed red as he gestured at the board filled with symbols he barely recognized. What Marcus discovered in the next few moments would shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman who'd been working in his home for 6 months. Some lessons can't be found in the most expensive schools money can buy. Dear viewer, I humbly request you to watch or listen till the end and rate this story out of 10. Your rating will help me to give you better stories in next videos. If you are watching my story for the first time, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The morning sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Wellington mansion, illuminating every corner of the pristine living room. Elena Martinez wiped down the already spotless grand piano for the 3rd time that morning, her practiced hands moving with mechanical precision. At 39, she had perfected the art of becoming invisible, a necessary skill for someone in her position. Elena. Where are my blue cufflinks? Marcus Wellington's voice boomed from upstairs, carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. In your jewelry box, Mr. Wellington. Left compartment. Elena called back, not pausing in her work. She had learned the location of every item in this 7-bedroom estate within her first week. Organization was survival. Marcus descended the spiral staircase, his 6-foot frame wrapped in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months. At 39, he had built Wellington Tech Solutions from a garage startup to a $50 million company. His success was worn like armor, expensive watch, designer clothes, and an air of untouchable confidence. I have back-to-back meetings until 7 tonight, he announced, more to himself than to Elena. David has soccer practice at 4. Make sure he's ready. Of course, Mr. Wellington. He paused at the door, turning back with an afterthought. And Elena? The Hendersons are coming for dinner Friday. I need this place absolutely perfect. They're potential investors, and I can't afford any distractions. The way he said distractions made Elena's jaw tighten. She nodded with practiced servility. Everything will be perfect, sir. As his Tesla purred down the driveway, Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She climbed the stairs to David's room, where the teenager was struggling with his algebra homework, his face scrunched in frustration. Morning, David, she said warmly, setting down her cleaning supplies. Morning, Elena. He looked up with relief. I'm so dead. This test is tomorrow and I don't understand any of this stuff. Elena glanced at the textbook. Quadratic equations. She felt that familiar pull, the ache of knowledge kept locked away, of abilities forced into hibernation. Your father hired Mr. Peterson to tutor you. Where is he? David rolled his eyes. He cancelled again. 3rd time this month. Dad pays him $200 an hour and he barely shows up. Elena moved closer, looking over his shoulder at the problems. Her fingers itched to pick up the pencil, to show him the elegant logic behind the numbers. You should tell your father, she said carefully. Dad doesn't have time to listen. He's always busy, always working. David's voice carried a loneliness that made Elena's heart ache. She recognized that emptiness, the hollow space left by absent parents, even when they lived under the same roof. Try this problem again, she suggested gently. Think of the equation as a balance. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. David's brow furrowed as he worked through the problem, and Elena felt a dangerous warmth spread through her chest as understanding flickered in his eyes. Wait. I think I got it. His face lit up with genuine excitement. Good job, Elena said, quickly gathering her cleaning supplies. She had already said too much, crossed an invisible line. I need to finish the bathrooms. As she scrubbed tile and polished fixtures, Elena's mind wandered to another lifetime. Dr. Elena Martinez, Ph.D. in Advanced Mathematics from Stanford University. Published researcher. Guest lecturer. All of it buried under the weight of one catastrophic mistake and the systematic destruction of her career by people who couldn't tolerate her success. The memory still burned, the accusations, the fabricated evidence, the university committee that chose to believe lies over truth. Her department head, Dr. Harrison, a man whose mediocre research she had outshone, had orchestrated her downfall with surgical precision. No criminal charges, but professional annihilation. Her name became poison in academic circles. She had tried to fight it. Lawyers, appeals, desperate letters to review boards. But without money or institutional support, she had been crushed under the weight of a system designed to protect its own. Her savings evaporated. Her apartment went into foreclosure. She had wound up here, in Los Angeles, rebuilding from nothing with a new last name and a carefully constructed past that omitted her degrees, her publications, her entire former life. The doorbell chimed at 3 o'clock. Elena opened it to find a young man in his 20s, designer gym bag slung over his shoulder. I'm here for David, he announced without introduction, brushing past her. You must be Mr. Peterson, Elena said to his retreating back. Yeah. Where's the kid? Elena directed him to David's room and returned to her work, but something nagged at her. 20 minutes later, passing by the study, she heard raised voices. I don't understand why you can't just give me the answers, David was saying. What's the point of all this? Look, kid, I've got a party at 5. Just memorize these formulas for the test. That's what I did. But I want to actually understand it. Understanding is overrated. You think your dad understands every detail of his business? He pays people for that. You're going to do the same someday. Just pass the test. Elena's hands clenched around her dust cloth. She forced herself to keep walking, to mind her own business, to stay invisible. But David's disappointed face haunted her as she prepared dinner, grilled salmon with asparagus, Marcus's usual request. Marcus returned at 7:30, loosening his tie as he entered. How was tutoring? He asked David, barely looking up from his phone. Fine, David mumbled. Good. I'm paying enough for it. He turned to Elena. Dinner smells good. I'll eat in my office. I have calls with the Tokyo office. As Elena served his meal on the finest china, Marcus finally looked directly at her. You've been here 6 months now. You're doing adequate work. Thank you, Mr. Wellington. My ex-wife always complained about the help. You at least know your place. He said it as if he were giving her a genuine compliment. Elena's smile didn't waver. I appreciate the opportunity, sir. Later, as she cleaned the kitchen, David appeared in the doorway, textbook in hand. Elena? Can I ask you something? Of course. That thing you said earlier, about equations being like a balance. It really helped. Could you, maybe explain one more problem? Just one. Elena looked at the boy's hopeful face, at the textbook filled with concepts she could unravel in her sleep. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to protect herself, to remain safely invisible. Please. David added. Mr. Peterson makes me feel stupid. But when you explained it, it actually made sense. Elena glanced toward Marcus's office, where she could hear him barking orders into his phone. She thought about all the knowledge locked inside her, gathering dust like the unused rooms in this massive house. One problem, she agreed softly. But this stays between us. Over the next 3 weeks, Elena found herself in an increasingly precarious position. David had begun seeking her out during his homework time, asking questions that Mr. Peterson either couldn't or wouldn't answer properly. Their sessions were always brief, always secretive, stolen moments when Marcus was locked in his office or away at meetings. "You explain things so much better than Peterson," David said one afternoon as Elena helped him understand polynomial functions. They were in the study, the door cracked open so Elena could hear if Marcus came home early. "Mr. Peterson has his own methods," Elena replied diplomatically, though she cringed every time she heard the tutor's oversimplified explanations through the walls. "His method is telling me to memorize stuff without understanding why it works. That's not learning, that's just—" David struggled for the word. "Parroting," Elena supplied. "Exactly." David's eyes lit up with recognition. "How do you know so much about math? Did you take classes?" Elena's hand paused over the equation she was writing. "I had good teachers once. A long time ago." She had become masterful at deflection, at giving answers that satisfied without revealing anything real. But David was perceptive, more observant than his father. "You're different from other housekeepers we've had," he said thoughtfully. "The way you talk, the words you use. My dad doesn't even notice, but I do." "I should get back to work," Elena said, standing abruptly. "Your father will be home soon." "Wait, can you help me with this last problem?" "David, please. Just one more." Elena found herself constantly negotiating this dangerous line, unable to fully suppress the teacher she had once been, yet terrified of the consequences if Marcus discovered what she was doing. She told herself she was just helping a lonely boy with his homework, that it meant nothing, that she was simply being kind. But the truth was more complicated. Every time she stood at that whiteboard, explaining concepts, watching comprehension dawn on David's face, she felt alive again. The phantom limb of her former identity ached with bittersweet recognition. Marcus remained oblivious. His interactions with David were perfunctory at best, questions about grades, reminders about behavior, occasional mentions of legacy and expectations. He never asked what David was learning, never showed interest in the process, only the results. David got a 92 on his algebra test, Mr. Peterson announced proudly one Friday afternoon, as if he had personally achieved this miracle. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Good. Keep it up, son. Wellington men are achievers." What Marcus didn't know was that David had nearly failed the previous test before Elena's interventions. Mr. Peterson's contribution had been minimal at best. He showed up for his contracted hours, scrolled through his phone, and collected his generous paycheck. The following Tuesday, Elena arrived at work to find Marcus in an unusually agitated state. He paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply. "I don't care what it takes, Henderson. Get those projections up by 15% or find someone who can." He ended the call with a violent jab at the screen. "Coffee, Mr. Wellington?" Elena offered quietly. "Strong. Black. Now." He threw himself onto the leather sofa, radiating barely contained fury. "Incompetent people everywhere. I'm surrounded by them. People who can't perform, can't deliver, can't think beyond their job descriptions." Elena brought the coffee in his favorite mug, Italian ceramic, probably worth more than her weekly salary. He took it without acknowledgement. David's tutor cancelled again, Marcus continued, apparently needing to vent to someone, and Elena was the only person available. "Fourth time this month. These young people have no work ethic. In my day, you showed up and did your job." "Perhaps a different tutor might be more reliable," Elena suggested carefully. "Peterson has credentials from USC. Credentials matter. They show commitment, education, breeding." He took a long sip of coffee. "Not like these service people who drift from job to job with no direction." Elena felt the words like small cuts, precisely placed. She kept her expression neutral. Will you be home for dinner tonight, sir? 7 o'clock. I'm having clients over, the Chens from Shanghai. This deal could triple my Asian market presence. Everything needs to be impeccable. Can you handle that, or do I need to call a catering service? I can handle it, Mr. Wellington. Good. At least you're reliable. That's something. As he disappeared into his office, Elena allowed herself a moment of bitterness. If Marcus Wellington knew who was actually teaching his son, who was really responsible for David's improving grades, the irony would probably kill him. That afternoon, while Marcus was at a business lunch, David convinced Elena to help him prepare for an upcoming advanced placement exam. They worked in Marcus's study, using his expensive whiteboard, a luxury item that Marcus himself never used, purchased purely for appearance. This concept is called the fundamental theorem of calculus, Elena explained, her hand moving confidently across the board. It connects differential and integral calculus in a beautiful way. Watch. She lost herself in the explanation, the pure joy of illuminating complex ideas, making them accessible. David leaned forward, completely engaged, asking insightful questions that revealed genuine mathematical intuition. You should have been a teacher, David said when they finished. Like, a real teacher. You're amazing at this. Elena's throat tightened. I'm a housekeeper, David. This is just a hobby. But you're wasting your talent cleaning houses. Don't you want more? What I want doesn't matter, Elena said, more sharply than intended. Life doesn't always give us choices. Sometimes we do what we must to survive. David looked confused by her intensity, and Elena immediately regretted the outburst. She softened her voice. Your father will be home soon. We should. The front door opened. Elena's heart stopped. Marcus wasn't due back for another hour. I forgot my portfolio, his voice carried from the entryway. Need it for the Chin meeting. Elena frantically began erasing the whiteboard, her hands shaking. David grabbed his textbook, trying to look casual. But there wasn't enough time. The equations were complex, covering half the board, clearly far beyond what a 13-year-old should be studying with a housekeeper. Marcus's footsteps approached the study. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She had just lifted the eraser to the final equation when the door swung open and Marcus Wellington stepped into the room, his eyes moving from David to Elena to the whiteboard covered in advanced calculus. The silence stretched like taffy, thick and suffocating. What, Marcus said slowly, dangerously, is going on here? The air in the study seemed to crystallize, each molecule sharp with tension. Marcus Wellington stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame blocking any hope of escape, his expression morphing from confusion to anger in real time. I asked you a question. His voice dropped to a lethal quiet. What is going on in my study? Elena's hand froze mid-erase, chalk dust coating her fingers like evidence. David opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off with a subtle shake of her head. This was her responsibility, her risk, her consequence to face. I was helping David with his homework, Mr. Wellington, Elena said steadily, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Helping. Marcus moved closer, his eyes scanning the whiteboard with growing incredulity. That's what you call this? He gestured at the advanced equations partially obscured by eraser marks. This is calculus. David is 13 years old. He's studying basic algebra. I can explain, David started. Be quiet, David. Marcus didn't even look at his son. His full attention had fixed on Elena with laser intensity. I want to hear from our housekeeper exactly how she thinks she's qualified to teach my son advanced mathematics. The contempt in the word housekeeper was carefully calibrated, not quite an insult, but dripping with dismissal. Elena felt the familiar sting of being reduced, minimized, made small. David expressed interest in learning beyond his current curriculum, Elena said, keeping her voice level and professional. I was simply showing him some connections between concepts. Connections. Marcus laughed, a harsh bark of sound. You're a domestic worker. What could you possibly know about mathematical connections? David shot to his feet. Dad, Elena knows more than Mr. Peterson. She actually explains things instead of just telling me to memorize. Sit down. The command was absolute. David sank back into his chair, but his jaw set with stubborn defiance. Marcus turned his full attention back to Elena. Let me be very clear about something. I hired you to clean my house. To do laundry. To prepare meals. I did not hire you to fill my son's head with ideas above your station or his current needs. Do you understand the difference? Yes, sir. The words tasted like ash. David has a tutor, a qualified tutor from a prestigious university. If David needs additional help, that's what Mr. Peterson is for. Not you. Elena bit back the response burning on her tongue, that Mr. Peterson was a fraud who barely showed up and contributed nothing when he did. That she held a PhD from Stanford. That she had published research papers Marcus probably couldn't even read. None of it would matter. In Marcus Wellington's world, credentials only counted when attached to the right kind of person, someone who looked like him, talked like him, came from his world. I apologize for overstepping, Mr. Wellington, she said instead. It won't happen again. You're damn right it won't. He grabbed his portfolio from the desk, his movements sharp with barely contained anger. I'm late for my meeting. When I return tonight, I expect this board completely clean and this room exactly as you found it. He paused at the door. And Elena? Don't mistake my tolerance for friendship. You work for me. Remember your place. The door slammed behind him. In the ringing silence that followed, Elena heard the Tesla roar to life and speed down the driveway like an angry beast. David's face had gone red. He's such an asshole. He didn't even listen. David, don't. Elena began methodically erasing the remaining equations, each swipe of the cloth removing another piece of forbidden knowledge. Your father has every right to set boundaries in his own home. But you were just helping me. And you're better at teaching than Peterson ever. It doesn't matter how good I am, Elena interrupted. I'm the help. That's all I am to him, all I can ever be. I forgot that for a moment. I won't forget again. That's not fair. Fair. Elena turned to face him, and something in her expression made David go still. David, let me tell you something about the world. Fair is a fairy tale they tell children. The truth is much simpler. Some people are born on third base and think they hit a triple. Your father is brilliant and hardworking, I don't doubt that. But he's also a man who has never had to wonder if his success would be questioned because of his skin color, his gender, his background. He's never had to be twice as good for half the recognition. So when he sees someone like me teaching someone like you, he doesn't see a teacher and a student. He sees disorder. Hierarchy violation. The help getting uppity. David looked stricken. I never thought about you that way. I just thought, you were really smart and nice. Elena's anger deflated. He was just a kid, a good kid, trapped in his father's narrow worldview but not yet hardened by it. I know you didn't. You're a good person, David. Don't let your father's limitations become yours. She finished cleaning the board, erasing every trace of their lessons. As she worked, David watched in troubled silence. Elena, he said finally. Where did you learn all this? Really? For a long moment, Elena considered telling him the truth. But what would that accomplish? He was 13, still dependent on his father, still years away from having the autonomy to question the structures that shaped his life. I read a lot, she said simply. And I had good teachers, once upon a time. Now go work on your regular homework. The kind Mr. Peterson assigns. That evening, Elena prepared the dinner for Marcus's meeting with the Chens with mechanical precision. Peking duck with all the traditional accompaniments, expertly prepared despite her hands shaking with residual adrenaline. She set the dining room to perfection, crystal glasses, fine china, fresh flowers arranged with mathematical precision. When Marcus arrived with his guests, he barely glanced at her. "Elena, serve in 15 minutes. "Yes, Mr. Wellington." She became a ghost, a shadow moving through the edges of their conversation, pouring wine and serving courses while remaining utterly invisible. The Chen spoke in a mix of English and Mandarin, and Elena caught enough to understand they were discussing a manufacturing deal worth several $1,000,000. Marcus was in his element, charismatic, confident, closing the deal with practiced efficiency. This was the version of himself he showed to the world, the self-made millionaire, the business genius, the man who built an empire through vision and determination. None of them noticed when Elena cleared the plates. None of them thanked her when she refilled their glasses. She had perfected the art of service, present but unseen, helpful but unacknowledged. After the guests left, Marcus retreated to his office without a word. Elena cleaned the dining room, washing each piece of expensive crystal by hand, drying them with soft cloths so they wouldn't spot. When she finally finished at 11 o'clock, she found David waiting in the kitchen. "I wanted to say goodnight," he said. "And I'm sorry about my dad." "You don't need to apologize for him." "But I do. Because he's wrong about you. I don't know your whole story, but I know you're more than what he sees." Elena felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. "Go to bed, David. School tomorrow. Will you still be here tomorrow? He didn't fire you, did he?" "I'll be here. Your father needs someone reliable." She managed a small smile. Besides, who else would clean his house to his exacting standards? After David went upstairs, Elena sat alone in the dark kitchen, too exhausted to drive home yet. She thought about Dr. Harrison, about the lies that had destroyed her career. She thought about the dean who had believed those lies without investigation. She thought about the colleagues who had abandoned her when she needed support. And now Marcus Wellington, who saw her as nothing more than a maid, treating her with casual contempt while his son's improvement came directly from her teaching. The next 2 weeks passed in careful silence. Elena maintained strict boundaries, focusing solely on her assigned duties. David tried several times to ask her questions, but she gently redirected him to Mr. Peterson. The tutor had apparently been warned by Marcus because he started showing up more regularly, though his teaching remained as superficial as ever. Elena watched David's enthusiasm for learning slowly drain away, replaced by the mechanical process of memorizing formulas without understanding their beauty or logic. It hurt more than she expected, this death of curiosity in a young mind. Marcus seemed satisfied. His world had returned to proper order, the help stayed in her place, his son had appropriate instruction from appropriate sources, and his business continued its relentless expansion. Then came the Friday evening that changed everything. Marcus was hosting a cocktail party for potential investors, a crucial event he'd been planning for weeks. Elena had spent 2 days preparing, the house gleamed, the catering was arranged, every detail orchestrated to project wealth and success. "Remember," Marcus told her that afternoon, "you're to stay in the kitchen unless called. I don't want the help mingling with guests." "Understood?" "Perfectly, Mr. Wellington." The guests began arriving at 7. Elena recognized some faces from business news, tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, even a former senator. This was Marcus's ecosystem: power, money, influence. From the kitchen, she could hear laughter and conversation, the gentle clink of champagne flutes, the sounds of networking and deal-making. She prepared appetizer trays and kept the catering staff organized, playing her role perfectly. Around 8:30, David wandered into the kitchen, uncomfortable in the button-down shirt and slacks his father had insisted he wear. "Dad wants me to meet everyone," he said miserably. "To practice my social skills." "Then you should go mingle," Elena encouraged. "It's good experience. They're all talking about things I don't understand." Stocks and investments and market projections. He grabbed a mini quiche from a tray. I'd rather be doing homework. Elena smiled. Now that's something I never thought I'd hear a 13-year-old say. Yeah, well, it's better than listening to boring rich people talk about how much richer they want to get. David Wellington. Marcus's voice called from the living room. Where are you? David sighed dramatically and trudged back to the party. Elena returned to her work, but 15 minutes later, one of the catering staff rushed into the kitchen looking panicked. We have a problem. Mr. Wellington's business partner just arrived with his daughter, and she has severe allergies. The food we prepared, Elena's training kicked in instantly. What's she allergic to? Shellfish and peanuts. Half our appetizers have one or the other. Show me what's safe. Elena quickly assessed the available food, her mind calculating substitutions and alternatives. Within 10 minutes, she had reorganized the entire catering spread, creating a completely new selection of allergy-safe appetizers using ingredients from Marcus's well-stocked kitchen. She was plating the final tray when Marcus appeared in the doorway with a tall, distinguished man in his 50s. Elena, this is Richard Chen, you met him at our dinner. His daughter has dietary restrictions. Marcus's tone was clipped, stressed. Can you prepare something appropriate? Already done, Mr. Wellington. Elena presented the new spread. All items are free from shellfish and peanuts. I've also prepared a separate plate that's completely vegetarian and gluten-free, in case that's needed. Richard Chen's eyebrows rose with impressed surprise. That was fast. Elena is very efficient, Marcus said, though he looked surprised himself. As they left, Elena heard Richard say, You found a good one there, Marcus. Hard to find quality help these days. Yes, well, she knows her place, Marcus replied, and Elena felt the familiar sting. An hour later, Elena was refilling ice buckets when she heard raised voices from the study. She paused, recognizing David's frustrated tone mixed with an unfamiliar man's condescending drawl. I'm telling you, the kid doesn't understand basic mathematical principles, the man was saying. I've been trying to explain this concept for 20 minutes. Elena's protective instincts flared. She knew she should stay away, mind her business, but something in David's defeated silence pulled at her. She cracked open the study door. Mr. Peterson stood at the whiteboard, his explanation of integral calculus so wrong it made Elena's teeth hurt. David sat slumped in his chair, confusion and frustration written across his face. It's not that hard, Peterson was saying. Just memorize the formula. That's all you need for the AP exam. But how does the formula work? David asked. What does it mean? It means what it means. Look, I don't have time for philosophical discussions. I have plans tonight. Either learn it or don't. Elena found herself stepping into the room before her brain could stop her. Excuse me, Mr. Peterson. I need to clean this room for the party. Peterson glanced at her with barely concealed annoyance. We're in the middle of a session. I understand, but Mr. Wellington specifically requested. Fine. Whatever. He grabbed his bag. David, study those formulas. Quiz on Monday. He brushed past Elena without another word. David stared at the board with glazed eyes. I hate math now. It used to be interesting, but Peterson makes it feel like torture. Elena knew she should leave. She had already violated Marcus's explicit boundaries once, suffered his anger, learned her lesson. But looking at David's defeated expression, at the butchered explanation still on the board, she couldn't help herself. The formula isn't the point, she said quietly. It's just a tool to describe something beautiful. David looked up. What do you mean? Elena moved to the board, her hand hovering over the eraser. This was a line she had promised herself she wouldn't cross again. But the teacher in her, dormant but not dead, stirred to life. May I? She asked. David nodded eagerly. Elena picked up the marker. Imagine you're driving a car, and you want to know how far you've traveled. She lost herself in the explanation, her hand moving across the board with practiced confidence, breaking down the complex concept into understandable pieces. David leaned forward, his eyes brightening with comprehension. So the integral is like adding up all the tiny distances, he asked. Exactly. You're measuring the accumulation. The formula is just shorthand for, Elena. Marcus's voice cut through the moment like a blade. What are you doing? She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his face flushed with anger and, was that alcohol? The cocktail party had clearly been successful. I was just, Elena started. Just teaching my son again. After I explicitly told you not to. Marcus moved into the room, bringing with him the smell of expensive scotch and barely contained rage. I gave you a clear directive. Were my words unclear? No, sir. Then what part of know your place did you not understand? David stood up. Dad, Mr. Peterson's explanation was wrong. Elena was just, I don't care if Peterson's explanation was in ancient Greek. He is qualified to teach you. She is not. Marcus's voice had risen to a near shout, and Elena could see several party guests gathering in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Actually, Elena said quietly, I am qualified. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Marcus stared at Elena as if she had suddenly started speaking in tongues. Excuse me. Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, but something inside her had snapped, some final thread of patience or fear or self-preservation. She was tired of being small, of hiding, of letting men like Marcus Wellington define her worth based on her job title rather than her capabilities. I said I am qualified, she repeated, her voice steadier now. To teach mathematics. To your son. To anyone, actually. Marcus laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. You're a housekeeper. I'm a housekeeper now, Elena corrected. But I used to be Dr. Elena Martinez, Ph.D. in Advanced Mathematics from Stanford University. Published researcher. Guest lecturer. I taught at the university level for 7 years before. She hesitated, then pushed forward. Before my career was destroyed by false accusations and institutional bias. The silence that followed was absolute. Through the open door, Elena could see the party guests frozen in tableau, champagne flutes suspended mid-sip, conversations died on lips. Richard Chen stood at the front of the group, his expression unreadable. Marcus's face had gone through several color changes, red to white to red again. That's, you expect me to believe. I don't expect you to believe anything, Mr. Wellington. I'm simply stating facts. Elena moved to Marcus's desk, where his laptop sat open. May I? Before he could respond, she had pulled up the Stanford University website and navigated to the mathematics department's archived faculty pages. There, in a photo from 8 years ago, was Dr. Elena Martinez, same face, same eyes, but different clothes, different hair, different life. Her publications were listed below: novel applications of topology in quantum field theory, dimensional analysis in non-Euclidean spaces, a dozen more titles that might as well have been written in another language to anyone without advanced mathematical training. David moved closer, reading over her shoulder. Holy crap, he breathed. Elena, you were a professor. I was. She looked directly at Marcus. And I was good at it. Until a colleague decided that a 31-year-old black woman shouldn't be outperforming him in research publications. He fabricated evidence of academic misconduct, plagiarism, specifically. Said I had stolen research from his unpublished papers. The university chose to believe a tenured white male professor over a junior black female faculty member. No due process, no investigation, just a quiet resignation and a warning that if I fought it, they would make the accusations public and ensure I never worked in academia again. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. The party guests had begun whispering among themselves, but Elena no longer cared. 8 years of silence had built up enough pressure to fuel this confession. I spent 2 years fighting it anyway, she continued. Lost my savings, my apartment, my reputation. The accusations followed me everywhere. Every job application rejected, every interview cut short once they made calls to my former colleagues. Dr. Harrison, the man who destroyed me, was very thorough. He made sure everyone knew I was difficult, unprofessional, not a team player. Code words that mean she didn't know her place. So you became a maid? Richard Chen had stepped into the study, his voice neutral but his eyes sharp with intelligence. I became whatever I needed to become to survive, Elena replied. I changed my name, moved across the country, and started over. Cleaning houses doesn't require background checks or reference letters from people who want you to fail. It pays enough to live on. And it let me disappear from a world that had made very clear I wasn't welcome. Marcus finally found his voice. Why didn't you tell me this when I hired you? Would it have mattered? Elena met his eyes. Would you have hired a difficult ex-professor to clean your house? Or would you have assumed I was trouble, someone who couldn't get along with others, someone with an attitude problem? The job application asked if I could clean and if I had reliable transportation. That's what I provided. But you let me treat you like. Marcus trailed off, perhaps realizing for the first time how his words and actions over the past 6 months must have landed on someone with Elena's background. Like the help. Elena finished. You did treat me like the help, Mr. Wellington. Because that's what I am to you. That's all I could ever be. You looked at me and saw a domestic worker, and nothing I could say would have changed that fundamental perception. David had been reading through her publications, his expression growing more awed with each paper title. You discovered new mathematical principles. Your work is cited in our textbook. He held up his AP calculus book, flipping to the bibliography. Here, Martinez, E. et al. That's you. That was me, Elena said softly. Richard Chen moved closer to the laptop, reading carefully. When he looked up, his expression had completely changed. Dr. Martinez. I know your work. I have a PhD in applied mathematics from MIT. I read your paper on topological applications when I was completing my dissertation. It was brilliant. Now it was Elena's turn to be surprised. You're Dr. Chen. From MIT? Guilty as charged. He smiled slightly. I went into business instead of academia, but I follow the research. Your disappearance from the field was noted. There were rumors, but nothing concrete. What happened to you is unconscionable. Marcus looked between them, clearly lost. Wait, you're saying she's legitimate? This isn't some elaborate con? Richard's expression hardened. Marcus, this woman is one of the most talented mathematical minds of her generation. And you have her cleaning your toilets. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Several party guests had now crowded into the doorway, and Elena could see the judgment forming on their faces, directed not at her, but at Marcus. I didn't know, Marcus said weakly. How could I have known? You could have asked, Elena replied. You could have seen me as a human being with a history instead of just a function in your household. But people don't generally ask housekeepers about their doctorates, do they? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked genuinely stricken, and Elena felt a small stab of sympathy despite everything. He was, in his way, a victim of his own narrow worldview, unable to see beyond categories and hierarchies he had internalized as natural law. Why did you help David? Marcus asked finally. If I treated you so poorly, why teach him? Elena glanced at David, who was watching her with a mixture of awe and protectiveness. Because he was struggling, and I had the knowledge to help. Because he's a good kid who deserves better than memorizing formulas without understanding their beauty. And because. She paused, surprised by the truth of her next words. Because teaching is who I am. You can take away my title, my position, my reputation, but you can't take away my ability to share knowledge with someone who wants to learn. Richard Chen nodded approvingly. That's the mark of a true educator. One of the other guests, a woman in an elegant pantsuit, spoke up. I'm Jennifer Hartley, CEO of TechEd Solutions. We develop educational software and online learning platforms. Dr. Martinez, would you be interested in discussing a position with us? We're always looking for talented educators with advanced credentials. Another voice from the crowd, Brian Foster, Foster Consulting. We advise on STEM education policy. Your perspective would be invaluable. Elena felt dizzy. After years of rejection and silence, opportunities were suddenly materializing from the wreckage of her exposure. The cocktail party had transformed into something entirely different. What had started as Marcus Wellington's showcase of wealth and connections had become, improbably, a professional networking event centered on his housekeeper. The irony was not lost on anyone present. Jennifer Hartley had taken Elena aside to a quiet corner of the living room, away from the growing crowd of curious onlookers. I meant what I said about TechEd Solutions, she told Elena, pulling out a business card. We're developing an advanced mathematics curriculum for gifted students, but we've struggled to find educators who can make complex concepts accessible. Your publications suggest you have exactly that ability. Elena took the card with trembling fingers. Miss Hartley, you should know I come with baggage. The accusations against me were clearly fabricated, Jennifer interrupted firmly. I've been in this business long enough to recognize a pattern. Accomplished woman of color threatens mediocre white male colleague, colleague strikes back with false accusations, institution protects its own. Tale as old as time, unfortunately. Her expression hardened. Dr. Harrison did something similar to a colleague of mine at Berkeley. He has a pattern, but he's protected by tenure and old boys networks. You know Harrison? Elena felt a chill run through her. I know of him. And I know his type. Look, I can't undo what happened to you, but I can offer you a fresh start. TechEd is based in San Diego, far enough from Stanford to be a clean break. We pay well, respect our experts, and we're building something that matters. Think about it. As Jennifer moved away to rejoin the party, Brian Foster approached with two other guests. Dr. Martinez, I'd like to introduce you to some people. This is Dr. Sarah Kim, she runs the mathematics department at UCLA. And this is Marcus's business partner, Richard Chen, though you've already met. Sarah Kim extended her hand with a warm smile. I've been listening to your story, Dr. Martinez. It's outrageous what happened to you, but not surprising. Academia has a long way to go in terms of equity and justice. She glanced at Marcus, who was standing awkwardly by the bar looking like a man watching his reality rearrange itself. I'm actually here because UCLA is launching a new initiative to recruit talented mathematicians who've been pushed out of traditional academic tracks. We specifically want to address the systemic biases that cost us brilliant minds like yours. Would you be interested in a conversation about returning to university teaching? Elena felt overwhelmed. Too many opportunities, too fast, after years of nothing. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take our cards and think about it, Richard Chen suggested gently. No pressure, no immediate decisions. But Dr. Martinez, Elena, you have allies now. People who understand what happened and want to help correct it. David had been hovering nearby, his face glowing with pride. This is so cool, he said when the adults moved away to refresh their drinks. Everyone's treating you like the rock star you actually are. Elena managed a shaky laugh. It's a bit overwhelming. You deserve it though. You're brilliant. He paused, then added more quietly, I'm sorry my dad was such a jerk to you. He didn't know, David, your father isn't a bad person. He's just. Elena struggled for the right words. Limited by assumptions he's never had to question. He sees the world a certain way because that worldview has always worked in his favor. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. But understanding why people do hurtful things is the first step toward change. She squeezed his shoulder. You're already better than him in that regard. You asked questions, you wanted to understand. That's what makes the difference. Across the room, Marcus was deep in conversation with Richard Chin. Their voices were low, but Elena caught fragments, didn't realize, feel like an ass, how do I fix this? Richard's response carried more clearly, you can't fix it, Marcus. The damage is done. But you can learn from it and do better going forward. Starting with treating people with basic dignity regardless of their job title. The party gradually wound down, though several guests lingered to speak with Elena, exchanging contact information and promising follow-up conversations. When the last guest finally left around midnight, the house felt eerily quiet. Elena began cleaning up, instinctively reverting to her role despite everything that had happened. She was loading the dishwasher when Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. You don't have to do that, he said awkwardly. I mean, after tonight, I still work for you, Mr. Wellington. Unless you're firing me. No. God, no. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd seen before when business deals went sideways. Elena, Dr. Martinez, I owe you an apology. Multiple apologies, actually. Elena continued loading dishes, giving him space to speak. I've been thinking about every interaction we've had over the past 6 months, Marcus continued. All the little comments, the casual dismissals, the way I talked about knowing your place. Jesus, I sound like a Victorian aristocrat. He laughed bitterly. Richard said something tonight that really hit me. He said privilege is invisible to those who have it. I've spent my entire life thinking I earned everything through hard work, never realizing how many advantages I had that others don't. A prestigious name, connections, people who assumed I was competent before I proved anything. That's called being white in America, Elena said quietly. Marcus winced. Yeah. I'm starting to understand that. But understanding and fixing are different things. He moved closer, leaning against the counter. Why didn't you defend yourself more? When I was berating you, putting you down, you just took it. Elena finally looked at him directly. Because I needed this job, Mr. Wellington. Because single black women who've been blacklisted from their profession don't have the luxury of pride. Because speaking up, defending myself, showing any hint of anger or resistance, all of that would have gotten me labeled as difficult or aggressive, and I would have lost the one source of income keeping me housed and fed. She returned her attention to the dishes. Survival requires swallowing a lot of dignity. The silence that followed was heavy with implications neither of them wanted to fully examine. I don't want you to quit, Marcus said finally. But I understand if you do. After tonight, you have opportunities, real opportunities in your actual field. You'd be insane to stay here cleaning my house. Is that your way of asking me to stay? I'm asking you to stay if you want to. But also acknowledging that you deserve better than this. He gestured around the kitchen. You deserve to be using your mind, your expertise. David's right, you're brilliant at teaching. He's learned more from you in a few secret sessions than he has in months with Peterson. Are you firing Mr. Peterson? Already sent the email. He's a fraud coasting on credentials. Marcus smiled slightly. I'm learning to recognize the difference between titles and actual competence. Elena closed the dishwasher and turned to face him. Mr. Wellington, Marcus. Please. I think we're past formalities. Marcus, Elena corrected. I appreciate your apology. I do. But apologies without changed behavior are just words. If I stay, and that's still an if, things need to be different. Not just for me, but for how you see the world and the people in it. I know. Richard made that very clear. So did about 6 other people tonight. He met her eyes. I want to do better. I want to be better. But I'm going to need help understanding what that looks like. Would you be willing to help me figure that out? It was perhaps the most vulnerable she'd seen him, stripped of his usual armor of confidence and success, just a man recognizing the limitations of his worldview. I'll think about it, Elena said. Both staying and helping. But I need some time to process everything that happened tonight. And to seriously consider those other opportunities. That's fair. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, David thinks you're the greatest teacher he's ever had. And after seeing how he lit up while you were explaining calculus, I think he's right. After Marcus left, Elena finished cleaning and finally allowed herself to sit down at the kitchen table, exhausted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Hartley, serious about the offer. Let's talk this week. Another text from Sarah Kim, UCLA would be lucky to have you. Coffee Tuesday. Her old life was suddenly within reach again, or at least a new version of it. But it came with risks. Returning to academia meant returning to visibility, to the possibility of Dr. Harrison learning where she was and trying to destroy her again. It meant fighting battles she'd already lost once. David appeared in the doorway, in pajamas now. Can't sleep. Too much excitement for one night. He sat down across from her. Are you going to leave? Take one of those jobs everyone was offering. I don't know yet. I hope you don't. I mean, I want you to be happy and successful and all that. But also. He looked down at his hands. You're the first person who's made me feel like learning could be exciting instead of just a chore. Mr. Peterson made math feel like punishment. You made it feel like magic. Elena felt her throat tighten. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a very long time. I mean it. And I think my dad is starting to get it too. He's not a bad person, he's just been kind of blind. David looked up. Do you think people can really change? Like, fundamentally? I think people can grow if they're willing to do the hard work of examining their assumptions. Whether your father is willing to do that work, time will tell. They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment. Then David said, whatever you decide, thank you. For teaching me, but also for showing me that there's more to people than what they appear to be on the surface. That's a lesson I won't forget. After David went to bed, Elena sat alone in the quiet kitchen, thinking about choices and consequences, about pride and survival, about the strange paths life takes. Tomorrow she would start making decisions about her future. But tonight, she simply sat with the profound strangeness of having been seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small apartment, a studio in a less fashionable part of Los Angeles, and stared at the business cards now arranged on her coffee table like tarot cards revealing possible futures. Jennifer Hartley's sleek Tech Ed Solutions card. Dr. Sarah Kim's UCLA Department of Mathematics card. Brian Foster's consulting firm card. Each represented a door back to her former life, a chance to reclaim the identity she'd been forced to abandon. But with each door came risk. By morning, she had made a decision, or at least the beginning of one. She would meet with these people, have the conversations, explore the possibilities. But she wouldn't quit Wellington's house. Not yet. There was unfinished business there, questions that needed answering. When she arrived at the Wellington mansion Monday morning, she found Marcus already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with dark circles under his eyes and 3 empty coffee cups. Couldn't sleep either, he asked as she entered. Apparently not. Elena began preparing breakfast, a routine so familiar it required no thought. You're usually at the office by now. Took the morning off. Wanted to be here when you arrived. He watched her move around the kitchen with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew where everything belonged. I've been reading your research papers. Or trying to. Most of it is beyond my comprehension, but I get the gist. You weren't just a good mathematician, you were exceptional. Were, Elena emphasized. Past tense. Only because you were forced out, not because your ability disappeared. Marcus stood up, restless. I made some calls last night after everyone left. To the president of Stanford University, actually. We serve on a charity board together. Elena's hand stilled on the egg she was cracking. You did what? I asked about the case against you 8 years ago. Off the record, just, context. He was cagey at first, cited confidentiality, but I pushed. Eventually, he admitted there had been concerns about how your situation was handled. Apparently, Dr. Harrison has a file of complaints from female colleagues and students. Nothing ever stuck because he's brilliant at covering his tracks and the university values his research funding more than justice. I could have told you that, Elena said bitterly. I did tell them that, in fact. They didn't care. They should have cared. And the fact that they didn't, Marcus shook his head. It's unconscionable. I also learned that Harrison is up for a major award next month. The Goldstein Prize for Mathematical Innovation. It comes with significant prestige and a $1 million grant. Elena's stomach twisted. She knew that award, had dreamed of winning it herself once. Good for him. The thing is, part of his winning research portfolio includes work on topological applications in quantum field theory. Sound familiar? It took Elena a moment to process the implication. That's my research area. But he couldn't have, she stopped, a horrible suspicion forming. What exactly is he being awarded for? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the press release. As Elena read the description of Harrison's groundbreaking research, her blood ran cold. The concepts, the applications, even some of the terminology, it all built directly on her unpublished work, research she'd been developing before her forced resignation. He didn't just destroy my career, she said slowly. He stole my research. The papers I was working on when I left, he must have had access to them through the department server. He accused me of plagiarizing him, but he was actually plagiarizing me. That's what I suspected, Marcus said. And if we can prove it, we can't. Elena set down the phone, years of learned helplessness warring with sudden fury. Academic plagiarism is notoriously hard to prove, especially years after the fact. I have no proof those ideas originated with me. My research files were on the university server, and I lost access the day I resigned. Harrison is tenured and protected. I'm a disgraced ex-professor with no institutional backing. Who's going to believe me? I will, said a voice from the doorway. Elena turned to find Richard Chen entering the kitchen, briefcase in hand. I hope you don't mind, Marcus called me this morning. We've been strategizing. Strategizing what? Elena felt overwhelmed by how quickly her carefully controlled life was spinning into chaos. Your vindication, Richard said simply. He set his briefcase on the table and pulled out a laptop. I stayed up most of the night going through Harrison's recent publications and comparing them to your earlier work. The pattern is unmistakable. He's been building his career on stolen ideas, yours and probably others. But you're the one he destroyed most thoroughly, which suggests you had the most valuable research to steal. Marcus leaned forward. Richard has connections at Stanford. He thinks we can force an investigation. They already did an investigation, Elena said. They chose to believe him. That was 8 years ago, before #MeToo, before institutions started taking misconduct seriously. Richard paused at Elena's skeptical expression. Okay, before they had to at least pretend to take it seriously. The climate has changed. And with multiple credible witnesses willing to testify to Harrison's pattern of behavior, plus forensic analysis of the stolen research, we can build a case. Elena wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that justice was possible. But she'd been burned too badly to trust easy promises. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Richard's expression softened. Because what happened to you shouldn't happen to anyone. Because Harrison's theft isn't just personal, it's a betrayal of everything academia is supposed to stand for. And because. He hesitated, then continued, my sister went through something similar. Different field, same pattern, male colleague, stolen research, career destroyed. She's a social worker now. She shouldn't be. She should be conducting the neuroscience research she spent a decade preparing for. But the system broke her. His voice hardened. I couldn't help her in time. Maybe I can help you. The kitchen fell silent except for the quiet gurgle of the coffee maker. Elena felt tears threatening and pushed them back angrily. She'd spent 8 years being strong, surviving, not allowing herself the luxury of hope. And if we fail? She asked. If Stanford circles the wagons again? If Harrison buries us with lawyers and institutional power? Then at least you'll have fought, Marcus said quietly. And you won't have fought alone. David chose that moment to stumble into the kitchen, drawn by voices. He stopped short seeing the gathering. What's going on? We're planning a revolution, Richard said with a slight smile. Want to join? Over breakfast, Elena insisted on feeding everyone despite their protests. The three of them outlined a strategy. Richard would leverage his alumni connections to request a formal review of Elena's case, including an independent audit of Harrison's recent research. Marcus would use his business influence to put pressure on Stanford's board of trustees, several of whom sought his investment in their ventures. And Elena would need to do the hardest part, relive her worst professional nightmare by documenting everything that had happened, including the research Harrison had stolen. There's another piece to this, Marcus said as they finished eating. Elena, you've spent 6 months working for me. In that time, you've demonstrated exceptional mathematical knowledge, innovative teaching ability, and professional expertise. I'm willing to write a detailed letter of recommendation attesting to your capabilities and character. It won't erase what happened, but it's evidence from an independent source that you're exactly who you claim to be. You're going to recommend your housekeeper for a mathematics position? Elena couldn't help the slight edge of sarcasm. I'm going to recommend a brilliant educator who happens to currently work as my housekeeper because the system failed her. Marcus met her eyes. There's a difference. David had been quiet, listening intently. Can I do something? To help? You already have, Elena told him. You reminded me why teaching matters. Why it's worth fighting for. Over the next week, Elena lived in a strange dual reality. By day, she maintained her routine at the Wellington house, cleaning, cooking, maintaining the pristine environment Marcus required. But her evenings and nights were consumed by documentation, writing detailed accounts of her time at Stanford, reconstructing her stolen research from memory and the few personal files she'd managed to save. Richard worked his contacts methodically. He discovered 3 other women who'd had negative experiences with Dr. Harrison, not as dramatic as Elena's case, but a pattern nonetheless. One had been denied tenure under suspicious circumstances. Another had left academia entirely after Harrison spread rumors about her competence. A third had filed an official complaint that had been quietly buried. He's protected, Richard explained during one of their strategy sessions at Marcus's house. But protection has limits. If we can show a pattern of behavior in stolen research, even Stanford's administration will have to act. They can't afford the publicity scandal, especially not in the current climate. Marcus had thrown himself into the cause with the same intensity he brought to business deals. I'm learning something, he admitted one evening as he, Elena, and Richard reviewed documents in his study. I always thought success was purely merit-based. Work hard, be smart, get ahead. But that only works if the playing field is level. For someone like Elena, the field wasn't just uneven, it was actively hostile. No amount of brilliance could overcome systematic opposition. Welcome to intersectionality, Elena said dryly. Black, female, and smarter than my male colleagues. That's a triple threat in academia. David had become increasingly involved, using his teenage social media savvy to research Harrison's public presence. "He's really active on Twitter," David reported. "Lots of posts about academic excellence and intellectual integrity. The irony is painful." "Screenshot everything," Richard advised. "If this goes public, we'll want documentation of his hypocrisy." Sarah Kim from UCLA had stayed in touch, and when Elena told her about the campaign against Harrison, Sarah offered institutional support. "UCLA will back you," she promised. "We've been wanting to address Stanford's toxic culture for years. If you're willing to be public about this, we'll stand with you." Public was the key word that terrified Elena. Going public meant exposure, vulnerability, the possibility of further humiliation. But Richard pointed out the strategic advantage: Harrison's power comes from operating in shadows. Shine a light on him, and he loses his protection. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon. Richard called Elena at work, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "We got it. The forensic analysis of your old research files versus Harrison's publications. The similarity is statistically impossible to be coincidental. He didn't just borrow ideas, he lifted entire theoretical frameworks." Elena's hands shook as she held the phone. "That's proof. That's proof. Combined with the witness statements and the pattern of misconduct, we have a case. Stanford's president has agreed to reopen the investigation into your dismissal." After 8 years, the door she thought permanently closed had cracked open. The formal announcement came on a Monday morning. Stanford University was conducting an independent review of Dr. Elena Martinez's resignation and the circumstances surrounding allegations of academic misconduct from 2017. The statement was carefully worded, avoiding admission of wrongdoing while acknowledging concerns about procedural fairness in how the case had been handled. Dr. Harrison's response was immediate and vicious. He released a statement calling the investigation a witch hunt orchestrated by individuals with personal vendettas. He portrayed himself as a victim of cancel culture, a brilliant scholar being torn down by lesser talents. "He's scared," Richard observed as they read Harrison's statement in Marcus's study. "That defensiveness is telling. Innocent people don't react with such aggression." The media picked up the story quickly. "Stanford reopens case of dismissed black female professor," ran in the Chronicle of Higher Education. "Mathematical plagiarism allegations rocked prestigious university," appeared in Science magazine. Suddenly, Elena's story was public in a way she had both hoped for and dreaded. The interview requests were overwhelming. Elena declined most of them, but agreed to speak with a reporter from the New York Times who had written extensively about academic misconduct. The resulting article, "The Professor Who Became a Housekeeper, Elena Martinez's Journey from Stanford to Survival," went viral. Marcus read the article on his tablet over breakfast, with Elena sitting across from him drinking coffee. It was a strange new dynamic between them, no longer employer and housekeeper, but something undefined, two people navigating unprecedented territory. "They quote me," Marcus said. "About finding out my housekeeper was a PhD and how it challenged my assumptions about worth and work." "How does it feel?" Elena asked. "Being publicly associated with your former Maid scandal?" "Former?" Marcus looked up. "You're quitting?" "I thought that was understood. Sarah Kim offered me a position at UCLA, associate professor, immediate start. TechEd Solutions wants me to lead their curriculum development. I can't exactly do either of those while cleaning your house." "No, I suppose not." Marcus set down the tablet. "I'm going to miss you, though. The house won't be as clean, obviously, but more than that, you've been good for David. Good for me, too, in ways I'm still processing." David wandered in, already reading the article on his phone. "You're famous, Elena. There are like 1,000 comments on the Times website." "Fame is not always a gift," Elena said, but she couldn't help smiling at his enthusiasm. The investigation moved surprisingly quickly. Stanford had clearly decided that swift action was preferable to prolonged scandal. An independent committee reviewed all available evidence: Elena's original research files, Harrison's publications, testimony from Elena and the other witnesses, forensic analysis of the plagiarism claims. Dr. Harrison fought back with expensive lawyers and institutional allies, but the evidence was damning. The committee's preliminary findings, leaked to the press, indicated serious concerns about research integrity and abuse of institutional power. "They're going to recommend revoking his tenure," Richard told Elena during a phone call. "And invalidating his recent publications. The Goldstein Prize Committee has already withdrawn his nomination." Elena should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. "It doesn't give me back 8 years of my life. It doesn't undo the trauma of being professionally destroyed." "No," Richard agreed. "Justice doesn't work that way. But it does mean you were right, he was wrong, and the world now knows it. That's not nothing." The formal announcement came 3 weeks after the investigation began. Stanford issued a public apology to Dr. Elena Martinez, acknowledging that she had been subjected to false accusations and inadequate due process. Dr. Harrison was placed on immediate administrative leave pending formal disciplinary proceedings. The university also announced a comprehensive review of its policies regarding academic misconduct allegations and institutional bias. Elena read the statement in Marcus's study, surrounded by Marcus, Richard, Sarah Kim, and David. When she finished, she set down the paper and simply sat in silence. "How do you feel?" David asked tentatively. "Vindicated," Elena said slowly. "Angry that it took this long. Sad for the Elena who went through this 8 years ago with no support. Grateful for everyone here who made this possible." She looked at each of them. "Mostly, tired. This kind of fight is exhausting." "But you won," Marcus pointed out. "I survived," Elena corrected. "Winning would be if this had never happened in the first place." The media coverage intensified. Elena did a few carefully selected interviews, using each opportunity to talk about systemic issues in academia, how institutions protect powerful men, how women of color face disproportionate scrutiny, how the meritocracy myth ignores structural barriers. Dr. Harrison's downfall was swift and absolute. 3 major publications retracted his papers. His research funding evaporated. Former colleagues distanced themselves. The man who had seemed untouchable 6 months ago was now professionally radioactive. "Part of me feels bad for him," Elena admitted to Marcus one evening. "Isn't that stupid? He destroyed my life, and I feel bad watching his life be destroyed." "It's not stupid," Marcus said. "It's empathy. The fact that you can feel it after everything he did to you, that says something about your character versus his." Elena's last day at the Wellington house was a Friday. She had accepted the UCLA position, with a start date in 2 weeks, time to move, to prepare, to transition from housekeeper back to professor. Marcus had insisted on marking the occasion with a dinner, not a fancy catered affair, but something simple. Elena cooked, one final time, preparing her grandmother's recipe for arroz con pollo. They ate together at the kitchen table, Marcus, David, and Elena, plus Richard Chen who had become a regular presence. "I have something for you," Marcus said when they finished eating. He handed Elena an envelope. Inside was a check, a substantial one. Elena looked up, confused. "This is more than my final paycheck." "It's back pay," Marcus explained. "For the 6 months you worked here. I calculated what I should have been paying you if I'd known your actual qualifications and expertise. Consider it consulting fees for David's mathematical education." "Marcus, I can't." "You can and you will. You earned it. Multiple times over." He smiled slightly. "I also made a donation to UCLA's diversity initiative in your name. And I'm establishing a scholarship fund for students who've faced institutional discrimination. It won't fix what happened to you, but maybe it will help others." Elena felt tears threatening for the first time since this whole ordeal began. "Thank you." David pulled out his own envelope. Mine's not money, he said sheepishly. I wrote you a letter. About what you taught me. Not just the math, but the other stuff. About seeing people for who they really are, not what they appear to be. Elena opened the letter and read David's careful handwriting. Dear Elena, before you came to our house, I thought success meant having money and a big house and everyone thinking you're important. My dad taught me that by example, not on purpose, but just by how he lives. But then you showed me something different. You showed me that real success is knowing who you are even when the world tries to tell you you're nobody. You lost everything and became a housekeeper, but you never stopped being brilliant. You never stopped teaching, even when you weren't supposed to. You never let anyone's opinion make you smaller. I'm going to remember that. When I'm older and have to make choices about what kind of person I want to be, I'm going to remember you. Not just the math stuff, though that was awesome, but the way you kept your dignity even when my dad was being a jerk to you. That's real strength. Thank you for everything. I hope UCLA students appreciate how lucky they are. Your friend, David. Elena did cry then, quietly, while David looked mortified and Marcus pretended not to notice. I'm going to miss you both, she said when she could speak again. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, the belief that people can change, that justice sometimes happens, that fighting back isn't always futile. Richard raised his wine glass. To Dr. Elena Martinez. May UCLA appreciate the extraordinary gift they're receiving. They clinked glasses, a moment of genuine connection across all the lines that had once divided them. Later, as Elena prepared to leave for the last time, Marcus walked her to the door. I've learned more from you than I taught you, he said. Thank you for that. And for not giving up on David. On us. You did the work, Elena replied. I just helped you see what needed changing. She drove away from the Wellington mansion as the sun set over Los Angeles, casting everything in golden light. In her rearview mirror, she saw Marcus and David standing in the doorway, waving. She waved back, acknowledging the strange journey that had brought her here, from professor to housekeeper to professor again, but changed by the passage. The next chapter of her life was beginning, built on the ashes of the old one but stronger for having been tested. She thought about the Elena of 8 years ago, broken and hopeless, and wished she could tell her younger self, you will survive this. You will find unexpected allies. You will be seen. As she pulled onto the highway toward her new future, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years, hope that wasn't tempered by fear, pride that wasn't shadowed by shame. Dr. Elena Martinez was going back to where she belonged. But this time, she was going back on her own terms. UCLA's mathematics department occupied a modern building on the edge of campus, all glass and steel and natural light, a far cry from Stanford's traditional architecture, but Elena found she preferred it. New beginnings deserved new spaces. Her office was small but had a window overlooking the campus quad. Dr. Sarah Kim had insisted Elena take time to settle in before diving into teaching responsibilities, but Elena was eager to begin. She'd spent 8 years in exile, every day away from her true calling felt like waste. Your first class is Monday, Sarah said, stopping by Elena's office on a Friday afternoon. Advanced Topology. 12 students, all graduate level. They've been briefed about your unique journey to UCLA. Elena looked up from organizing her books. How much do they know? They know you were wrongfully pushed out of Stanford, that you've been vindicated, and that they're incredibly lucky to learn from you. Sarah smiled. I may have also mentioned you're brilliant and they should bring their A game. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Elena had taught this material before, but that felt like a lifetime ago. She practiced her lecture in front of the mirror, fighting off waves of imposter syndrome. What if she'd forgotten how to do this? What if 8 years of cleaning houses had dulled her edge? Monday morning arrived with typical Los Angeles sunshine. Elena dressed carefully, professional but comfortable, projecting confidence she only half felt. She arrived on campus early, giving herself time to find the lecture hall and set up her materials. The students filtered in gradually, a diverse group that made Elena's heart lift. This wasn't Stanford's homogeneous crowd. She saw faces from every background, heard multiple languages in the pre-class chatter. When the clock struck 9, Elena stepped to the front of the room. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Elena Martinez, and welcome to Advanced Topology." She launched into her lecture, and within minutes, the old rhythms returned. Her hand moved across the whiteboard with practiced confidence, breaking down complex concepts into digestible pieces, anticipating questions, drawing connections. The students leaned forward, engaged, asking smart questions that showed they'd done the reading. 75 minutes passed like 15. When Elena dismissed the class, several students lingered. Dr. Martinez, a young woman named Priya, approached tentatively. "I just wanted to say. I read the New York Times article about you. What happened was terrible, but the way you fought back, it inspired me. I'm the first woman in my family to study mathematics. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong here. But if you could survive what you survived and still be here teaching us, then I can handle whatever challenges come my way." Elena felt her throat tighten. "You absolutely belong here, Priya. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After the students left, Elena sat alone in the empty lecture hall, overwhelmed by emotion. She'd forgotten this feeling, the pure joy of sharing knowledge, of watching understanding dawn, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "How was your first class? Did you blow their minds?" Elena smiled and typed back, "I think it went well. How's your new tutor?" "She's good, but you're still better. Dad says hi." The relationship with Marcus and David had evolved into something unexpected, not quite friendship, but a connection forged through shared transformation. Marcus called occasionally to update her on his own journey, attending workshops on unconscious bias, diversifying his hiring practices, actually listening to people he'd previously dismissed. "I'm trying," he'd told her during their last conversation. "I still screw up constantly, but I'm trying." That afternoon, Elena attended a department meeting where Sarah introduced her to the full faculty. Some faces were welcoming, others skeptical. She recognized the look, doubt that she really belonged, questions about whether her credentials were legitimate, suspicion about the controversy surrounding her hiring. After the meeting, an older white male professor named Dr. Jameson cornered her in the hallway. "Dr. Martinez, I hope you understand that some of us have concerns about the politicization of this department. Hiring decisions should be based purely on merit, not on activism or media attention." Elena kept her expression neutral. "I agree completely, Dr. Jameson. My qualifications speak for themselves: PhD from Stanford, 7 years of teaching experience, published research in multiple peer-reviewed journals. I was hired based on merit. The media attention you mentioned came from the fact that my merit was ignored and my career was sabotaged by academic misconduct. But I'm here to teach and conduct research, not to be anyone's political statement." Jameson's jaw tightened. "I'm just saying there's a perception. Perceptions change when confronted with reality," Elena interrupted smoothly. "Give me 1 semester. Judge me on my teaching evaluations and research output. If I don't meet UCLA's standards, then you'll have legitimate concerns. Until then, I suggest we focus on our shared commitment to mathematical excellence." She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding. 8 years ago, that interaction would have terrified her, sent her spiraling into self-doubt. Now, she recognized it for what it was, a test she'd passed many times before and would pass again. Over the following weeks, Elena settled into her new life. Her classes flourished, students praised her teaching style, and her office hours were always full of eager learners. She reconnected with old colleagues who believed in her, building new professional relationships based on mutual respect. The story of her vindication continued to reverberate through academic circles. Stanford had completed its investigation, and Dr. Harrison faced formal charges of research misconduct and abuse of power. Multiple universities had opened their own reviews of his visiting lectures and collaborative research, finding additional evidence of plagiarism and intellectual theft. "He's finished," Richard reported during one of their monthly dinners, a tradition they'd established to stay connected. "Completely unemployable in academia. Last I heard, he was threatening lawsuits against everyone involved in exposing him, but no lawyer wants to touch the case." "I should feel more satisfied," Elena admitted. "But mostly I just feel sad. Sad that it happened, sad that he wasted his talents on theft instead of doing his own work, sad for all the people he hurt along the way." "That's because you're a better person than he is," Richard said. "You turned your pain into purpose. He turned his insecurity into cruelty." Marcus had started attending these dinners too, bringing David when schedules allowed. The teenager was thriving, his math grades had soared, and he'd developed a genuine passion for the subject. He was considering studying mathematics in college, though he insisted he'd never be as good as Elena. "You don't need to be as good as me," Elena told him during one dinner. "You need to be the best version of yourself. That's a much more interesting goal." One evening, 6 months into her tenure at UCLA, Elena received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "From a former Stanford student." She almost deleted it, assuming it was hate mail. She still received occasional angry messages from Harrison supporters. But curiosity made her click it open. "Dr. Martinez, you don't know me, but I was a graduate student at Stanford when you were forced out. I didn't understand what happened at the time, I just heard rumors and saw you disappear. But recently, I read about your case and what Dr. Harrison did to you. I need to tell you something that's haunted me for 8 years. During your final semester at Stanford, I was Dr. Harrison's research assistant. He had me retrieve files from your research directory on the shared server, said he needed to review them for a collaborative project. I didn't question it because he was my advisor and I trusted him. But now, reading about the plagiarism allegations, I realize what I witnessed. He was stealing your research, and I inadvertently helped him do it. I should have spoken up during the original investigation, but I was young and scared and didn't understand what I'd been part of. I can't take back my silence, but I can offer to testify now about what I saw. I have emails from Harrison instructing me to access your files. If it helps your case in any way, I want to provide that evidence. I'm so sorry for my role in what happened to you. You deserved better from all of us. Sincerely, Dr. Michael Torres." Elena read the email 3 times, emotions cascading through her. Anger at Torres's complicity. Gratitude for his willingness to finally speak up. Sadness for the young student he'd been, caught in a system that punished truth-telling and rewarded loyalty to powerful mentors. She forwarded the email to Richard, who immediately recognized its significance. "This is the smoking gun. Direct evidence of Harrison's theft. Stanford's insurance company is going to love this, it strengthens your civil case exponentially." Elena had filed a lawsuit against both Dr. Harrison and Stanford University, seeking damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and reputational harm. Her lawyers had been optimistic, but this new evidence made the case nearly bulletproof. "Do you want justice or revenge?" Richard asked her during an emergency meeting to discuss the email. "What's the difference?" "Justice means holding Harrison accountable and receiving fair compensation for what was stolen from you. Revenge means destroying him completely, grinding him into dust, making him suffer the way you suffered." Elena thought about it. "Justice. I don't need him to suffer, I need him to be stopped from ever doing this to anyone else. And I need Stanford to implement real reforms so this pattern doesn't continue." The lawsuit moved forward with the new evidence. Stanford's lawyers, recognizing they had no defense, pushed for settlement. The final agreement included a substantial financial payment to Elena, a formal public apology from the university president, and most importantly, a comprehensive reform of Stanford's academic misconduct policies with mandatory bias training for all faculty. Dr. Harrison, facing both civil and professional penalties, issued a brief statement. I acknowledge serious errors in judgment and apologize to Dr. Martinez for the harm caused. It was hardly a full confession, but Elena would take it. The settlement was finalized on a crisp December morning. Elena signed the papers in her UCLA office, Richard and Sarah present as witnesses and supporters. "How does it feel?" Sarah asked when it was done. "Like closing a chapter," Elena said. "Not erasing it, it's part of my story now. But closing it and moving forward." That evening, she called Marcus to tell him the news. "It's over," she said simply. "Congratulations. You fought and won." "We fought and won," Elena corrected. "I couldn't have done this alone." "Maybe that's the real lesson here," Marcus mused. "That none of us can do it alone. That privilege means nothing if it's not used to lift others up. That systems only change when people refuse to accept injustice. Look at you, Marcus Wellington, sounding like a social justice warrior." He laughed. "I have a good teacher." 2 years after that fateful cocktail party, Elena stood in the UCLA Faculty Center, accepting the Chancellor's Award for Teaching Excellence. The room was filled with colleagues, students, and friends, a community she'd built through hard work and authentic connection. Sarah Kim presented the award, listing Elena's accomplishments, innovative teaching methods, groundbreaking research in topological applications, mentorship of underrepresented students, contributions to departmental reform. But beyond her professional achievements, Sarah concluded, Dr. Martinez has shown us what true resilience looks like. She faced institutional betrayal and came back stronger. She was pushed down and refused to stay down. She lost everything and built something better from the ruins. UCLA is honored to have her, but more than that, we're honored to learn from her." The applause was thunderous. Elena stepped to the microphone, looking out at faces that had become familiar and dear. Marcus and David sat in the third row, they'd driven from Los Angeles specifically for this ceremony. Richard Chen was there with his sister, the one who'd lost her own academic career. Jennifer Hartley from TechEd Solutions had flown in from San Diego. "Thank you," Elena began, her voice steady. 2 years ago, I was cleaning houses and hiding my identity because the world had told me I didn't belong in spaces like this. I believed that story for a long time, that I was somehow less than, that my voice didn't matter, that safety meant invisibility." She paused, gathering her thoughts. But then something happened. A 13-year-old boy asked me a math question. And I had to make a choice, stay safe and silent, or risk everything by being authentically myself. I chose authenticity, and it changed my life. Elena's eyes found David in the crowd, now 15 and preparing for college applications. "What I learned is that our identities can't be stripped away by injustice. They can be suppressed, hidden, denied, but they remain. I was still a mathematician when I was scrubbing toilets. I was still an educator when I wasn't allowed to teach. The title didn't make me these things, I made the title meaningful through my actions." She gripped the award, a simple crystal obelisk that caught the light. "I also learned that redemption isn't something we achieve alone. It requires allies who see injustice and refuse to accept it. Marcus Wellington could have fired me when he discovered I'd been teaching his son without permission. Instead, he questioned his assumptions and became an advocate. Richard Chen could have dismissed my story as academic drama. Instead, he used his privilege and connections to amplify my voice. Sarah Kim could have seen me as too controversial, too risky to hire. Instead, she saw my potential and gave me a chance to prove myself." The room was silent, everyone absorbed in her words. To the students here, especially those from marginalized communities who sometimes feel like you don't belong, you do. Your presence is not a diversity statistic or a quota. You are the future of mathematics, of science, of every field you choose to enter. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't hide your brilliance to make others comfortable. And when you face injustice, because you will, fight back. Not with bitterness or revenge, but with excellence, persistence, and the knowledge that your worth is inherent, not granted by institutions or individuals. She looked directly at Marcus. To those with privilege and power, I say this: your comfort with the status quo is not neutral. It actively reinforces systems that harm others. You have a choice: you can be complicit in injustice through your silence, or you can be an active ally through your actions. That work is uncomfortable. It requires examining your biases, admitting your mistakes, and using your advantages to create space for those who've been excluded. But it's the only way forward toward a world where people like me don't have to lose 8 years of their lives to institutional betrayal. Elena felt tears threatening but pushed through. What happened to me was wrong. Dr. Harrison's theft of my research was wrong. Stanford's failure to protect me was wrong. But I'm standing here today because people chose to make things right. They didn't have to. It would have been easier to let my story fade into obscurity, another casualty of academic politics. But they fought anyway. She held up the award. So I accept this honor not just for myself, but for everyone who's been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of what success looks like. For every housekeeper with a PhD, every janitor with hidden talents, every person doing work beneath their abilities because systems failed them. You are not your circumstances. You are your character, your knowledge, your persistence. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Elena stepped away from the podium, overwhelmed by emotion. Students surrounded her, thanking her for her words, sharing their own stories of overcoming obstacles. Priya, the student from her first class, hugged her fiercely. I'm graduating next month with honors. I got into 3 PhD programs. None of that would have happened without your mentorship. You did the work, Priya. But you showed me it was possible. After the reception, the small group that had become Elena's chosen family gathered for dinner at a restaurant near campus. Marcus, David, Richard, Sarah, Jennifer, people from different worlds united by a shared commitment to justice. To Dr. Martinez, Marcus raised his glass. Who taught us all how to see? To second chances, Richard added. And people brave enough to demand them. To truth, Sarah said. Even when it's costly. To Elena, David finished simply. Who never stopped being herself, even when the world wanted her to disappear. They clinked glasses, this unlikely coalition, celebrating not just Elena's victory but the larger truth it represented, that change was possible, that people could grow, that justice sometimes, not always, but sometimes, prevailed. Later, as the evening wound down, David pulled Elena aside. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? Teaching me that day, even though it led to everything getting exposed. You could have just stayed quiet, kept your job with my dad, avoided all the pain of fighting back. Elena considered the question seriously. You know what? No. Because staying quiet would have meant staying invisible. And I learned something important over the past 2 years: visibility is worth the risk. Being seen, truly seen, for who you are, that's worth fighting for. Even when it's painful. I'm glad you took that risk, David said. Because you changed my life. You showed me what courage looks like. You showed me something too, Elena replied. You reminded me why teaching matters. Why it's worth breaking rules and crossing lines and refusing to be small. Because somewhere, there's always a student who needs exactly what you have to offer. And connecting with that student, that's sacred work. They rejoined the group, and the conversation flowed easily: shop talk about mathematics, gossip about academic politics, plans for future collaborations. Marcus was funding a scholarship program for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, with Elena helping to design the selection criteria. Richard was writing a book about systemic reform in higher education, with Elena's story as a central case study. Sarah was expanding UCLA's diversity initiatives, with Elena serving as a key advisor. The work of justice was never finished, they all understood that now. But incremental progress was still progress. Each reformed policy, each challenged bias, each empowered student represented a small victory in a much larger struggle. As Elena drove home that night, Los Angeles stretched out before her, a city of second chances and reinvention, where she'd lost herself and found herself again. She thought about the Elena of 8 years ago, broken and desperate, and wished she could send her a message: hold on. It gets better. You survive this. You come back stronger. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dr. Martinez, I'm a student at Stanford. I read about your case and it inspired me to report my own experience with academic misconduct. Thank you for having the courage to speak up. You're making a difference. Elena smiled through tears. This was the real legacy, not awards or settlements or vindication, but the ripple effect of refusing to stay silent. Every person who heard her story and found courage to tell their own. Every system reformed because of her willingness to fight. Every student who saw her example and learned that setbacks weren't endings. She parked outside her apartment, a nicer place now, in a better neighborhood, afforded by her professor's salary and settlement money. But as she climbed the stairs, she thought about that small studio where she'd lived during her years as a housekeeper. That Elena had been no less valuable than this one. The only difference was the world's recognition of that value. Inside, she made tea and sat on her small balcony, watching the city lights. Tomorrow she had a lecture to prepare, research to conduct, students to mentor. Tomorrow the work continued. But tonight, she simply sat with the profound satisfaction of knowing she'd reclaimed her identity on her own terms. Not because institutions finally acknowledged her worth, but because she had never stopped knowing it, even in the darkest times. The bored Marcus Wellington had stood in front of 2 years ago, demanding to know why his housekeeper was teaching his son, had become a metaphor. All of life was a whiteboard where you could write your own story. Systems and people could try to erase it, but the ghost of those equations remained, ready to be rewritten. Elena Martinez had rewritten hers. And in doing so, she'd given countless others permission to rewrite theirs. Dear friend, as we close Elena's remarkable journey, let's remember that hidden potential exists everywhere, in the people we overlook, dismiss, or underestimate. The person cleaning your office might be a brilliant scientist. The server bringing your food might be a gifted artist. Everyone has a story deeper than their job title. Real change happens when we choose to see people fully, to question our assumptions, and to use whatever privilege we hold to lift others up. It happens when we refuse to accept injustice, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient to fight it. Elena's story reminds us that setbacks aren't endings, they're chapters. That dignity can't be stripped away by circumstances. And that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply be ourselves, authentically, even when the world demands we stay small. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about courage, justice, and the power of never giving up. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by their current circumstances. Together, we can build a world where everyone is seen for who they truly are.